motion to reconvene. All in favor? Let's go for it. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, the ABCs. You know, I looked at this and I thought, what the devil does ABC stand for? and then you have to read into it.
Agency board committees.
And this is a big thing, the agency boards and committee review. Now, I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit to 8, okay? When we're dealing with agency boards and committee reviews, the mayor has asked for a council internal review, okay? And that's going to happen on June 9th. So you're all serving on agencies, boards, and committees. And Mayor, if it's all right, if one of the councillors want to be changed or something like that, should they bring that up on that council review, internal review?
Okay, if you remember, when we had our organizational meeting in the fall, I asked all of you if you wanted to see a change. I suggested that change is not a bad thing, but you preferred to stay on for 2 years. So it was agreed that we would stay on for 2 years. If at this time you want to start to give me notice of changes that you would like, fine. But we can discuss that at a later date.
On the 8A, okay? On the June 9th meeting. That's when that'll be discussed, Mayor?
Next Tuesday.
Well, at the meeting, are you referring to the council internal review? I think, if you remember, we had decided that quarterly we would kind of review our own performance together as council. And we haven't been doing that. And we are a little bit slack on staying on time. It's not calendared. We should have it calendared. So those are something that we need to do. And I think it would be good for ourselves to self-evaluate ourselves. And I really think there are some items, if you want to bring them up at that meeting regarding governance, it would be a good time to do it. But give me a little bit of heads up so I understand what you would like to kind of talk about.
The meeting on the 9th is not specifically to deal with ABC issues.
No.
It is not your organizational meeting.
But now.
No. It could be part of it if you want to give me notice of future changes. We can kind of look at it, but I think my opinion is that's part of the reorganizational meeting, which we normally do in the fall.
Now, for your information, at this meeting here will be almost like an in-camera meeting. Jeff and the administration will be excused, so that we as a council will discuss things internally. Okay?
Yeah.
So
it's for ourselves. It's our performance.
It's for us.
Okay. It's a self-evaluation kind of bet. Okay,
Merritt, now we've covered that sufficiently enough, you feel?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay, let's go back then to the ABCs. And Jeff, I'd like you to address both the 1 and the 2 on the cut material and on the agency boards and committees review and what you've done there.
Are we looking at 7B1 right now?
Yes, 7B1 and 2.
So as I got into this, council, this is a big thing to bite off and deal with. So what I would ask tonight is I want to go through a couple of overarching principled questions about agencies, boards, committees. I would prefer that we did not get into the discussion of the pros and cons of any individual board or committee tonight. We will have that discussion, but not tonight. So what I'd like to do is I gave you a number of questions in that 7B1, those guiding review questions. I want to go through those in a little different order than they're on the page. So I asked Councillor Bengry if he'd kind of let me go with this for a minute. And I just asked Councillor Bengry that just to kind of facilitate the discussion between the questions. Both Jill and I are going to just basically take notes on what was discussed. And then I want to come back to this council at our next CCW with a lot of the principles you said and a lot of the things I think you feel are important with our ABCs, and have a bit of a criteria that we can gauge many of our ABCs against. So council, I heard you feel this is important, or I heard you feel this is required, or this is necessary. So let's look at all of our ABCs in light of those things that you said. So today I want to go through the questions. Now you also have in the second part this big table. Obviously yours is the size of your screens, not 11 by 17, but I want to go through that not to discuss the merits of any board, but I want to make sure my information is correct.
Jeff, you don't have that on overhead, do you?
No,
Gee.
but
I've got it on here.
you should all have it.
Computer, so.
And like I said, when we get to that, I just want to go through quickly. You'll see I have a lot of question marks in it that I just don't know a lot about it. And I just want to make sure when we come to this at the next meeting, my information's correct. So what I want to start out with, and again, Jill and I are taking some notes kind of above and beyond the minutes. When I got looking at this, I could see that it was there's a lot of things to consider here. So I may not have all the right questions, so if you think you might have one that would help here, by all means. But the first one I wanted some discussion around the table was, what do you see as the goal or purpose of agencies, boards, and committees within the community? Now you will notice whenever Cuff had something relatively specific to this, I put it in there. Not to say that what he put in here is what you should also feel. I want to be cautious of that. George is a smart guy and he's a good guy. But at the end of the day, this is your community. So he may have a good idea or some guidance, but you don't have to agree with it. So that's my first question, I guess, is when if you were just to discuss theoretically, what's the purpose of a committee in the town? What would we think?
Well, my thoughts on that are that the committees are effectively I don't know, this is going to sound wrong, but the workhorses of gathering that information from the community. So when economic development is putting something together, they get into detail and trying to find the answers to bring to council that are way beyond anything that council could spend the time to do. We'd be having that many more meetings every month in order to do that. So I think it's a source of the detailed information, the detailed planning for whatever that particular committee is in charge of.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Go ahead.
The way I look at it too, to me, a committee should be an extension of, like an appendage of a council, in order to help us fulfill our plan, our strategic plan. Because if we not focus to have that arm that we delegate, do that, then what's the relevance?
I would agree with that. That's why quite often I think we have our committees will say to us, what direction do you want us to be working in? So that they have the guidance of council to literally be that appendage. So I would agree with that.
They need to understand what we want to achieve in order to work towards that goal.
Yep.
To me, that would be the wisest use of people's time and energies, because hopefully at the end of that, they can then bring policies or recommendations that we can put in place and make a difference with. If we cannot make a difference, I don't see the relevance.
Council deals with policies, procedures. Administration deals with the day-to-day operations. To me, committees is like you said, Mayor, is the appendage of council, where council doesn't deal with policy and procedures, but they deal with another arm of the community, which council funds most of the time, you know, and the business is being done on behalf of the community in accordance to council directions. So, I don't know. Are we good with all of the committees that we have here?
Well, that will be a discussion that we need to have after we decide what we
Well,
are
I look at
supposed
this and I think to
to.
myself, holy smokes, there's a lot of committees, you know.
But if after this, they all fit the criteria that you feel are important, then yes, they're appropriate.
There.
Exactly.
But we may find that some don't. If I might, one thing I'm hearing is all the comments I would agree, and they reflect these town-created communities. What about the thought of the purposes of ABCs that are external to us? So not ones that we've created,
Right.
but ones that we participate on. What about some thoughts on that?
Well,
An example being interagency.
for example,
Well,
yours with
solid waste
waste
authority,
management, mine with South Grove, his
Chinook
with
Foundation.
his Chinook,
Orsk,
Orsk, the
So
intermunicipal.
ones that
Chinook
consist
Arch,
of other
Alberta
elected
Southwest.
representatives.
Yeah, so they're a little different in their scope, right?
Yeah.
Mormon Trail.
Yeah, you have a lot of them.
And, yeah, the mayor, for mayor's meeting.
This-
Go ahead.
The thing about these committees is, many of these committees, the town is providing funding, partial funding for these groups, right? Or we are requisitioned. And so we need to be there to ensure that the funding that we're allotting to these organizations, or foundations, or whatever it is, that this money is being spent wisely.
I'm gonna use
We
your
are part of
comment.
the process,
Yeah, I want to use your comment to segue to my next question now.
okay?
So my next one was, why do we assign councillors to agencies, boards, and committees? And I think yours is a good reason.
Yeah,
Right.
Stewards of
absolutely.
funding.
Yeah.
So why else would we assign you, good folks? What I did is I looked, you all sit on an average, by the way, an average of 5 committees per councillor. So you have 3 council meetings a month and you have 5 committees.
But the committees aren't all monthly.
They're not all monthly, that is true.
Some of them are.
But I can tell you, a guy like Councillor Creed's going a lot more than once a month to some of his committees. Or participating like with Communities in Bloom. How many days in June or May did you spend on Communities in Bloom?
Yeah, high vol, I mean,
Yeah.
I consider that.
You're volunteering.
The volunteering, but.
So some more than others. But on the average, you have 5 committees, and on the average, you meet 8 times a year. So just taking averages. You're on 5 and meet on the average of 8. So you're doing a lot. The question is, why?
Right. And, I mean, you talked about the external committee. I really think on external committees, a councillor's position is to really to be able to bring forward to that committee the position of their own town. For example, on waste management, it is very important that your voice be heard. Because if we have a chance to even chair such a committee, we can bring changes that may be favorable to your own municipalities and could be very favorable to other one also. But you might be an agent for changes. And that's not a bad position to be in.
I want to open this up so it's not so formal that I need to
Oh, okay. You
direct the
recognize
question.
everybody,
But go ahead, Bill.
Yeah.
But before you comment, Mike, I'm going to lose my train of thought here. What I appreciate about, let's take the management that you're on, Councillor Barfuss, is we get a 6-month head up that something big is going to happen that's going to involve our financial situation in our town. That's very important. And when we talk about requisitions, you know, with the EMS, the fire department, the Chinook Foundation, that could be a big bombshell to the council. And so as councillors, we need to recognize, you know, and bring that information to the council and say, hey, we need to be aware that we possibly could have a 10% increase on our requisition, or, you know, it could mean $5,000 or something like that. And that's very important to us. Okay, Councillor Creed.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that all boards and committees aren't equal, and you almost have to take them one at a time. Could you take something like Chief Mountain Solid Waste or EMS or Chinook Foundation, they're pretty much mandatory. I mean, we collect garbage, we contribute to solid waste. You pretty much can't get out of that. We know other things like say Southwest, South Grow, Mormon Trail, those are things that we decided to participate in. And, you know, like for a long time we weren't in Southwest, and we decided as a council that maybe there was some value in participating there. So we have to kind of tweak those and look at those committees and say, you know, these ones are essential. These ones are pretty much part of our operations. We have to be there. And then we can look at the others and say, these are voluntary, and is there value of being there, you know, like, so we kind of have to look at them a bit one at a time.
Agreed.
Jump in.
I want to go back on especially those committees that are requisitioning, and I'm on a few of those. And when there's budgets coming down, if we as councillors aren't there, they can just budget whatever they want and tell us this is what our requisition is. Now I look at the library. Now the library is a total different ball of wax from the rest of the boards. They have a different governance model, and they can do pretty well what they want to do without, you know, interference from governments. But if we weren't there, and myself or whoever else gets assigned sometime, we're not there to give them some guidance as to being responsible with the money that they're requisitioning, they're going to ask for all kinds of it. And I know that they're very careful, our library board, they really are. But I know that I've had to, over the past 2 years, I've had to sit with them during their budgeting time and let them know where our money's coming from, and remind them that we only have so much money in our pot. And some of the things that they may be asking for, I have to ask them, are they really that important that you have to budget another $3,000 for that item? You know, and so we can't escape our responsibility as councillors to be there to kind of guide, at least be our voice for our town, because there's other agencies out there also that are involved in asking for money and suggesting too. And so, boy, I tell you, I wouldn't want to just let them have free rein. Any committee, we have to be there. And the same on the EMS that Richard and I are on. And they're very responsible. I don't want anybody to ever think that they're not. They are very responsible. But sometimes things do come up in these committees that they become, the things that they want become the things that they need. And that was one of the things that I ran on to be elected, was that we have to understand our needs as opposed to our wants. Everybody wants things, but we have needs that supersede wants. And if the budget's there and we can cover the needs, and there might be a little extra for wants, then so be it. But we have to make sure that we're covering our needs. And I think that's one of the biggest responsibilities that we have as councillors, and as to make sure that they are going for their needs. Innovation will always crop up and think that the wants become needs in our mind. And I think, Councillor Barfuss, you've got one of those areas where innovations are always coming. And those innovations are not cheap, are they?
Nope.
And so you have to remind those people that, yeah, that's a neat idea, but maybe we're, you know, putting the cart before the horse, and we have to be very careful and be responsible for, because there are so many tax dollars. That's all.
What I really think we need to look at is what is the added value that we are gaining from having a committee and having a councillor on that committee. And can we define that added value? And I really think to be able to be transparent, accountable, we should find that added value, and I'm sure there is. But it needs to be defined so that we understand our role better. Mine included, to tell you the truth. I have quite a few of the external committee, and I really realize you can make quite an impact on them and on decisions. That's another area that not only looking after the budget, but sometimes is directions.
Well, Councillor Peavoy and I serve on a big committee. And it's a very involved committee, and we're constantly being reminded that our first priority is to the people that we serve. And we're constantly being reminded of that. And which is true, but at the same token, we have to put our caps in a lock position and say, hey, in the back of our mind, we got to be mindful of our budgets also, and why we're serving on this committee. And Councillor Barnes, you sit on a committee that is in a requisition position too. Well, two of us, two committees that we sit on are in requisition positions. And so as committee members, I know that we sit on that committee and we're responsible to that committee for what it does. But where does the responsibility and our responsibility to our own community, where do they interlock?
Well, that is a very good point, because that brings back the question, what is really the role of a councillor on a committee? What is it? Right. Is it one that forces their view, or is that one that listens and brings recommendation? Which hat are you wearing? And that's quite a question.
It's one of the questions. If I can jump off then, and I'm going to try and keep us moving along a bit here, because I'm hoping we keep this contained in under 6 o'clock when we're done this conversation. It goes into this next piece that I want a little feedback in a couple areas, and it's, does the fact that the town may wholly or partially fund an ABC factor into the participation level of a councillor on that same ABC? So would you as council consider it a hard, fast rule that if we fund it in any way, shape or form, we must have a councillor there to oversee the use of those funds? I can see merit in that, don't get me wrong. Or, well, let's start with that. What are your thoughts on the funding piece?
Just a question regarding that. Can you think of something we fund that there's no councillor that represents us?
Yes.
Well, yeah, we give money to COP.
But we have a councillor on COP.
No.
It's you.
He's not there as a councillor, he just happens to be a guy that's on the COP.
He's a volunteer.
I'll give you the same situation with the chamber.
Right.
We give the chamber money, and you happen to be a councillor on the chamber, but you're not there as the councillor. We would have, I'd have to look through that a bit, but those are two that would come up relatively
Community
quickly.
channel.
Yeah. But they don't have a board, per se.
They run autonomous without our input?
Yeah. Do you want to discuss that right now?
I think there's about 6, isn't there, Jeff? 6.
I'd have to go through them all, but when I was looking at the criteria here, I thought, okay, if council wants to look at where they should or should not have councillors attending on a full-time basis, is dollars one of the key pieces? And where it might not be, so I'll follow up with my follow-up question, although I was going to, so keep my first question in mind. But second is, if there was an agency board or committee that showed they had sufficient organization in bylaws or constitution, that they were stewards of that money, safe stewards of the money, would we need to have a councillor on that agency board or committee? Would that be needed?
It's a fair question.
That is a very interesting point, because sometimes our presence could stifle the conversation around the table of the committee if we come too forceful with our own idea and appear to be council's idea. And so it kind of has a reverse effect of what you want, which is to generate ideas and to generate solutions that are then brought to council for discussion and approval or rejection. But if we come so strongly with that position already, why do we even have a committee if we're already rubber stamping the whole of the initiative? That's a little bit of the issues that I can see. How do we do it so we are the ears and eyes without always being the mouth?
That's a good, I've got a thought on that. And I know the committees that I'm on, I don't have that experience because they're very responsible. And I'm glad that they are very responsible. And I just want to ask, is there any councillor here that's on a committee that you don't have to name the committee, but who have felt that they're not wanted there or that they're in the way? Have you ever felt that way?
I mean, it's us,
okay,
right?
I'm just saying that's a possibility, yeah. But yeah. I wanted to throw out there that I don't think it's happening here,
but
and I'm glad that it's not.
What I'm trying to say, when we look at those committees, we have to look at them not only from our perspective as a council. We are a unique council, but it has to be valid for any kind of council that will take those committees on. So what we have to think is maybe outside of our own box a little bit.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, there was a little discussion, in here that, that maybe the council needs to keep a tight rein on the committees. I don't think that has happened here with this council and with these committees, and so I think there's, we have a very healthy situation here. Yeah. But there is that possibility, that the council might want to keep a tight rein. I don't think, council should ever try to micromanage, what somebody else is doing, because it stifles the creativity.
I don't think that's our purpose, to micromanage any of these committees that we're on. We're there, like I think the mayor said it aptly, we are the ears and eyes, and we listen carefully. And if we're asked, and I know on the committees I serve on, I try to be very careful not to be the motivator of all the discussion. I want to hear what they have to say, and I listen to them and I learn. And if they ask me, or if I've been stimulated by the idea and I have an idea to add to it, then I will. And I think that's important that we do that.
I sit on a committee. It started out as a club, then it evolved into a committee. A committee that required, for some reason, a councillor. And Jeff has been confronted with this thing just in the last week, this one particular committee. But I also sit on the COP, not as a committee and not as an assigned councillor, but only as a volunteer in the organization. And I can tell you that organization is very, very frugal with their money. And the town has seen the benefits of having that particular group involved, which is the COP, in overseeing town activities, involved in drive-arounds and being part of the community. So there has been money set aside every year in the budget for, if they need it, for that COP program. And which is, and like I said, they're very frugal. They handle their money very, very well. And I don't see at this point in time a need for a councillor to serve on there. But I also see this other committee that I do serve on, that it's evolving into something big. And it could get quite, excuse me, could get quite economically involved if it's allowed. And I think Jeff knows what I'm talking about. And that's a concern of mine. Councillor Creed, you served on that committee before. It's growing, and the advantages of that to our community could be tenfold. But to what extent? Right now, do we see it develop and so forth?
So I'm not sure I really got clear on your feelings on being a councillor, but I want to ask a follow-up question just because it'll help us next time we go over this. We have some committees, and I can think of two off the top of my head, and I think they're the only two. And I'm not saying they should or should not do this, but they have bank accounts and money separate from the money that they would arrive at from the town. So it's the Powwow and Communities in Bloom. They have checking accounts separate, then so they can expend money without the town involvement. Okay, and they may raise it, they may get it privately, and they want that discretion to spend it. Is there any concern around the table about ancillary bank accounts or funds? And should that be something that we look at either as to manage within all of our organizations collectively, because it's not something addressed in any of our bylaws of our committees. So is it something that would concern you or not?
I've got a thought on that. Now, the library has their own money too.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, there's another example. They don't come to council whenever they need to buy something or whenever they need to reinvest their GICs and stuff like that. They give you a report annually of what's going on, but they don't come to council or the administration to ask what they can spend their money on when they're buying books and whatever they're buying for the library. The EMS is another one. They have their own funding, so there's probably quite a few that have. But I think the important thing is that aren't they all required to report annually where that money is being spent?
No.
Not any. But don't most of them give you reporting?
Many do.
Okay.
If I were to take like the handy bus, for example.
Yeah.
Your solid waste authorities, your libraries give us a report. The two I was thinking of were these little ones like Communities in Bloom and Peavoy.
Well, those are labeled as town. I was looking, because some are labeled as third party.
Yeah.
And these are labeled as town, so is that's where you're making the distinction? Is
Yeah, probably in this case, they're committees we've created by bylaw.
Yeah.
Can I maybe talk about that? The Community in Bloom, Councillor Creed, has a small account with the Royal Bank that they look after themselves.
Yeah.
And that account is an account that is generated through donations.
Right.
So is there a value in looking at that account and being able to say, okay, we could put it back into the town accounting, but under a separate ledger line, so that under Community in Bloom you would have your regular town account from which the town writes checks. And you could have a second one that could be that ancillary account, which is a donation account, and which would allow the town to, in fact, write donation slips. And it could be an advantage for the people who donate, right? Now, the Powwow is a little bit of a different beast, because the funding comes half from the town and half from the blood tribe. So it is in a town's account, but is kind of looked after by the committee.
And signing authority is different than what would be for the town.
Right, and assigning authorities are different. So should that also, how do we do it when half of the funds are yours and half they are not? So that is why there is a separate banking arrangement with different signing authorities, It's because the funding is not generated all through town.
So the
But there
powwow,
again,
yeah.
we have donations
Yeah.
that are generated and for which we are not able to give donation slip. So it has a disadvantage.
Right.
I'm not so sure how we deal with this one. So the 5,000 that is ours, we could say could be a town's account. The 5,000 that is not ours has to be a trust.
Yeah, well, the powwow could almost be considered maybe as a third party because, you know, it's not just the town. We do have other entities that are involved with the powwow besides town people. We have the Blood Reserve band contributing to that as well. Communities in Bloom is a little different because
Yeah, it is different.
It is totally a town committee, and it probably, you know, wouldn't matter. In fact, you're right, it might be an advantage to just take that other bank account and slip it, you know, in with part of the town account and take
Put on a separate
donations.
ledger.
Take donations, you know, and operate from one account. I think it's just a matter that that's kind of what happened, and whether it's the best practice or not, you know, we'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
And decide.
Jeff, do all of our committees that we serve on, are they all responsible to have policies and procedures in place?
I wouldn't say uniformly, no.
I
No.
serve on one that I would say does
Doesn't
not.
have one.
Now, we have, like, the town ones we've created by bylaw, generally, and not always, like the powwow. It's not by bylaw. So we're not even really consistent with some of those, and Councillor Creed's comment is totally correct, that it's actually intended to be, say, a regional or a two-party committee. But then if you look at many, in fact all, I think all of the committees we've created by bylaw, we've invited county representation, both elected officials and citizens at large, almost exclusively when we've created a bylaw. So we always have different jurisdictions on those committees. We don't get to share the costs of the functions of those committees with those other jurisdictions, unfortunately, but that's something we chose to do, and I think it's appropriate. So to your question, no, there aren't policies and procedures for many of the committees.
See, the concern to me is, if you don't have any policies and procedures in place, or some kind of rules of the organization, and you have your own bank account, and you're receiving funds from the town, who is responsible for the disbursement of your own bank account and covering those checks that are being written and so forth? You know, where's the covering
Okay.
your butt?
So this goes back to my question originally is, if you are on a board or committee that receives funds either from the province or from the town, but particularly from the town in this case, do you feel that there are proper checks and balances in place to manage those funds? And does it require a councillor on that committee to oversee that? Because that's what this is going to come back to the next time we meet, is we got these wonderful committees made up of wonderful people doing wonderful things. Do we need a wonderful councillor to attend those every month? Because you're already very taxed, and that comes at a cost.
So, just to put that into perspective, one of the committees that I serve on, which the town funds significantly,
Almost exclusively.
almost exclusively, previously, they had years where a councillor wasn't attending, because they don't have meetings very often.
Yeah.
The first meeting I went to, they were surprised to see me walk in the door. So, do I need to be there? The organizations function pretty well. Should I be there? I think there's some value. So,
Or should you receive minutes every month to know what's going on and be able
well,
to ask
they don't
questions?
meet monthly. I did.
Oh, yes, that's the one you meet.
They'd be maybe
Right.
annually.
Maybe annually.
Annually.
Or in emergencies when something comes up and it needs to be.
And they requisition the town for some money
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah, it's not done as a requisition, I don't believe,
Yeah.
but
But
yeah.
it's a form of requisition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they ask for
At the
money.
handicap.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
if they
Okay.
ask for money, it's a requisition.
Yeah, someone speaking in code is above my.
Yeah, it's Sandy.
I'm still trying to figure out Bengry committee over there.
Okay, so, great. I'm gonna move us to the next question. The next three I've got, I think we can get fairly quick here, and it's gonna be different, I'll acknowledge that, depending on the committee. But I think there's two differentiations here. What do you feel are appropriate terms for councillors to serve on an agency, board, or committee? Now, I would suggest there's two different kinds here. There's one made up solely of elected officials, and there's one that is, for the most part, citizens at large. Any thoughts on appropriate terms?
I had a chance to serve on a previous council and felt I felt really good when I changed committee and was able to kind of offer my 2 bits worth of wisdom on a new committee and come to understand a little bit more of the running of the town via that new arm. I think that you as council decided would be 2 years. Josh Goff said 1 to 2 years, 2 years at the max, except if it is an external committee, which says you may want to be there a little bit longer to try to understand the functioning and the issues, and then position yourself toward the chair of that external committee, because there's value for the municipalities that you serve to have you in a chair. And I think there is wisdom in what he says. I agree with what he says.
From my perspective, I agree with you completely in that I would like the experience of serving on more committees, so I have a better understanding of everything that's happening in our community. But for example, on Chief Mountain, I've seen great value in me being there for a couple of years instead of just the one. When I first came onto it, I had no understanding of what really happens there, and it takes time.
Yeah.
So especially on those external committees, I see some real value into having a little bit longer terms there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Councillor Peavoy and I serve on Chinook Foundation, and I think that if we only served for 2 years, we would lose it. The reason why, because they're going through an extensive rebuilding of the Chinook Foundation. So requisitions are very keen, very high in their eyes, and I think it's going to serve as continuity as we watch this progress go through when they're rebuilding a brand new lodge in McGrath. And I think we have to have that continuity to understand what's happening there.
If I may just speak to that, another example on Chinook Foundation is they're part of a larger provincial organization that in my experience, I only attended one of the annual meetings on behalf of the Chinook Foundation. And when I got there, I realized some of these municipal officers that are serving from their various towns, they've been in this provincial authority for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
They sit as chairs and vice chairs at the provincial level. They're involved in policy making in a big way. That's the kind of thing I think George Cuff was referring to.
Right.
If, you know, I'm not planning a 20-year stint, but but when they saw fresh blood, they were like, we could groom this guy into something, you know. I haven't volunteered for anything, right? Just so we're clear. But, you know, that's the idea is, you know, to find out that I would then maybe have the possibility of not being on Chinook next year. That really puts a wrench into that whole, you know, the opportunity for the South to be represented on some of those regional boards.
Yeah. I just wanted to comment. I feel like Councillor Barfuss, there's great value in moving some of us into different committees, but I think the same as you felt. I'm on the Chinook Arch, and it's all council members for the most part representing councils, and I think that's one where probably I would prefer just to stay for the term. And I think I think moving us around in some of these things is must. We should. But some of these other committees, I don't think that it would be wise to move us out. So it might be wisdom to move us around on maybe 2 or 3, and keep us on others that are, you know, very needful of us being there, you know. No, I served on the library board for almost 14 years, and now I'm back on the library board now as a council member, which I'm really enjoying it, and they enjoy me being there. But during the time that I was there, Councillor Creed was there, Councillor Edmonds was there, Councillor Bengry was the town representatives, and it was nice to have another, you know, differing opinion and voice in there. I found that very valuable to see the changes, you know. And so there is wisdom in moving around in some of them, but some of them I think is imperative that we stick around for our term.
Councillor Edmonds, we haven't heard too much from you.
Yeah, it's been about 6 weeks.
You sit on Orskin, and that's a big committee, and it's a lot of traveling involved.
Not so much. We only have one quarterly meeting, so we meet 4 times a year. And those meetings, I don't find that they're overly productive by being there, because everything is always decided by the executive before you even get there. Then they tell you what they've done. And by that time, it's too late to do anything. Feel like they gave their staff a 2% increase. There was no rhyme or reason to it. They said, oh, that's a cost of living. Cost of living wasn't 2%.
So do you feel that that's a valued position for you to be serving on Orskin?
If you're on the executive, yes. If you're just a representative from your community, no.
Can I just add something? We went to Orsk as the 4 mayors, and Jeff, were you there? You were there that night.
I drove you.
Remember.
You better be there be the driver.
Anyway, we addressed that very issue with the executive. That communication had to be more transparent, that there should be more accountability, and that we coming from our councillor down to our municipality, should be able to know what's going on without having that blank look and that stare saying, I'm not sure what I talked about, which is the case not only from your point of view, but it was a case from the other councillor representing their community at Orsk of the four municipalities that we represented that night. And we made it very, very clear that that had to change, because we didn't even understand why the requisition had changed the way it did. I said, we see our rates going up and up and up, but there's no rational, no rhyme, no reason as to why. So they promised us that they were going to make change in that direction.
How many years ago was that?
This was a month ago.
Yeah.
That was a month ago. Councillor, I remember what I do for presentation, and I keep an eye on them. I'm sorry to say. I do follow up. But so I understand what he's saying. It's still important. This is why it's important to try to be on the executive. But you're right, looking at their executives, they now have a little bit of new blood. They had about 3 or 4 new councillors who were astounded by the presentation that we made and learned a lot from where our frustration came from. And we're not going to let that pass under their nose so easily. And so I was glad that we were able to do that.
The other thing I noticed too is that they, when you get the minutes from the executive meeting, all it says is manager's report.
I know, it's ridiculous.
But it doesn't tell you what was discussed, what he reported on.
We talked about that too. We brought that too, that it was void of content. And that in general it's always the same person that makes a motion.
Now the other committee I serve on, Community Futures, it doesn't have to be an elected person that sits on that committee. It can be anybody at large. And the thing is, it's an appointment rather than an elected. The only reason that I got on there was because the town decided that Nolan wasn't the right person to be there as a town representative. But it's an appointment rather than an elected official thing.
Yeah, but that begs a question as to how we staff those committees, right? There are some committees that maybe, as COUF recommends, that we should advertise the position, the opening of position. But that one requires specific training. So.
Can I use that to segue into the very next question?
Sure.
I want to talk for a minute, and this was all good, but I want to talk for a minute about how we are getting citizens on our ABCs. Right now the process is that we allow that committee to bring names to council. Council simply says we have no objection to any of the names, which is fine, that works. COUF recommended it a little differently, that it was advertised that these committees will be looking, we're taking essentially applications.
Right.
We're taking expressions of interest, let's call them that, from residents who may want to serve on these boards. And then council goes through and seeks out residents and community leaders who they feel would be good. So it's a different approach. I wanted a little bit of feel before next time we meet about, what do you think about how we're currently selecting residents? Are we getting the right people on the ABCs when we talk about citizens at large? Or in your case, it's an appointment, we could have a citizen and not a councillor. And is our process the right one? What are your thoughts?
Go ahead,
All right, now I'll lead on this. You know, what we're doing right now isn't bad. You know, we're finding, you know, people and approaching them, and we're taking it from people that are on the committee saying, well, so and so might be good, but it does deprive citizens at large from the opportunity to, and the knowledge maybe that, you know, of being able to serve. So I think a hybrid approach might be valuable to at least notify citizens that we need volunteers on certain committees, and so that, you know, people could bring forward their names from outside. We could consider those as well when we do our committee selection, because on some of the committees that I'm on, you know, it's a little bit like shooting in the dark. Okay, these people, their terms are expiring, who can we get? And so we start grasping at straws. Well, let's see, maybe this person, maybe that person, and maybe we're not getting the right people. Maybe there would be people out there that would be interested, but they don't know about it. So I think reaching out would be good.
During my term so far, I've had people approach me and say that very thing. How do we get involved? We'd love to be involved. How do you get on these committees anyway? And it's really hard to give them an answer. And I think if we had that approach of volunteerism, true volunteerism, is when you do volunteer. Conscription is a different thing, and I think sometimes that when we appoint, we are conscripting people into these positions. And I think that I think it's a great idea to advertise. I really like George Cuff's approach to this, that we put out feelers in the community of people who are interested in serving on some committees. And there's a lot of people that have very specific interests in specific committees, and they have expertise that would be more than valuable. Because I know sometimes I've gone to some of the meetings and some of my groups, and I've overheard some of those people that have got on the committee, appointed to the committee, or selected, and they say, I don't know how in the world you ever got my name, you know?
Yeah.
And so what that does is it throws out the idea that they've been conscripted and they didn't really come willingly, but they thought, okay, I've been asked, I'll serve. And then it turned out that they served very well, you know? Yeah. But I think there'd be a lot more, what's the right word? I can't remember the word, synergy in committees, if you had people that were really super interested in them, and you could do that through this spirit of volunteerism, very, very good.
Jeff, it's nearing the hour. Do you want to
I agree
just about
with you.
summarize?
by the way.
I think we're close. Give me, if everyone's okay, I mean, we're only 6 o'clock, we're actually
Yeah.
moving along pretty good. We're faster than Jill bet me, and she's gonna lose. So.
This is where you can bring it up.
Yeah. My last one, and I want to ask this with a caution, I don't want to evaluate the merits of any specific board here, but I want to ask a question in theory. Because we've just seen a success in this recently, next meeting you're going to have a report from the age-friendly communities. You're going to receive their report. This was truly an ad hoc community. There was a specific project looking for specific information. The group met 3 times, I believe, gathered the information, did what they needed to do, and are providing recommendations to council, and they are disbanded. They are no more. And I think the citizens that were on that committee felt very engaged. They thought it was very worthwhile. And they met as long as it took to take care of the project, and they disbanded. My question is, do you see merit in reevaluating our whole committee process and advertising for people to sit on a series of project or initiative-based ad hoc committees? And we don't have so many long-standing meeting for the sake of meeting type of committee things. But we say, here's a project the council sees as a priority. Another example, the Collegiate Steering Committee. Now it's going to be a bit longer, obviously, because simply the scope is much greater. But that was something that not only was there a community need, that at the time there was some council participation, and so we have this group of citizens. There happens to be council representation on it, but it's not really a council committee per se. But I look at this age-friendly communities one and I see a real success of an ad hoc community. You're getting a very thorough report back on what we can do to be more age-friendly. Is there merit in looking at economic development initiatives, looking at parks and recreation initiatives, of having, instead of long-standing committees, short-term project-based committees? What are your thoughts?
So my first thought is, I think there's real merit in it. I think we'll use economic development as an example. I think you still need to have an economic development committee.
Okay.
But there's projects that committee is working on that having a community ad hoc committee underneath it that just dealt with that one issue, I think would have great value. And I think it's an area we could use a lot more of.
I think I do agree with that idea, but then it begs the question, how big should the original committee be if then you are looking at projects and where you really want to involve the community? So you should almost have an executive
That's what I'm thinking,
at
yes.
that committee that then develop the project or plans for projects and then advertise for manning those specifics.
Yep, that's.
It's a little bit the way South Grove was designed originally. South Grove was designed with the executive board, and then they had ad hoc committees under them that were developed as the need rose. So they had a different committee, one being with renewable energy. When the project was finished, there was no need to have that standing. So then you had people with expertise that came to those committees and really added a tremendous amount of value and were able at the end to say, okay, that is a project we have accomplished. And that's how it could impact communities. So it's a different model. But I think we need to then rethink how we man those committees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Jeff has referred to the age-friendly ad hoc committee, which actually became an offshoot from the FCSS, because
Right,
that was
same
where
kind of idea.
where the age-friendly was
Okay.
initiated, and then it came to council, and then we set up the ad hoc committee to run it, and it did work very well. We had a very specific mandate. We accomplished it. looking over the existing committees, I can't see any of the existing committees that I could feel it would be, ad hoc, because I can't see, any of them that are project-based. They kind of are continuous, like in Bloom. That's an ongoing thing. We don't, but there could be an offshoot of a certain project, maybe of communities in Bloom, that could go to, spawn an ad hoc committee. We did, I think in the last council, I think there was a little ad hoc committee when we were looking at swimming pool options and stuff like that. Probably not as successful at the time. Maybe there wasn't a very specific enough direction, or it was a little too nebulous or whatever. But if not, ad hoc committee is formed with a specific enough mandate and a timeline, I think it can be very valuable. To have an ad hoc committee just take something, do it, and then end. That's the important thing, ending, because too many government things start and they kind of drag on. But I think
Well, maybe then it is that if those committees are there to help us fulfill our strategic planning, then if there are projects that are there to help us, need to be done in order to satisfy that, then we need to see under which committee they would fit, and then advertise for specifics, possibly. I don't know.
Well, I think you get a better committee if you have volunteers on it than you do if you assign people.
Yes.
Because usually it's the same people that are assigned to
Everything.
committees.
You
And so you don't get any new ideas. And most of these people don't have the time to put into actually doing any research. So you lose out. Whereas if you have somebody that says, okay, I want to be on that committee, they're going to be gung-ho, and so they're on it for, say, 3 or 4 months, and then it's over. Whereas, like, if I look at the, when we looked at the MDP, we had a lot of meetings, but what was discussed in the meetings, we just went over some things that, okay, this is out of date, but there weren't any assignments made as to who was going to do that. And so unless people gave ideas, it didn't really change. But yet it was dragged on for a long period of time. So there's got to be a better way of doing things like that. Like, I don't think it should take a year to do your MDP. I think it needed tighter guidelines, because otherwise the Peter principle takes over, where the meetings adjust to the amount of time available. And you end up meetings for meetings. I found when I worked for the hospital that someone would call a meeting and you'd get there and everybody would say, what is the meeting for? And the person that had called the meeting didn't show up. Because they had to have a meeting. And I think that happens a lot of times in committee meetings, that you have a meeting and there's no agenda, nothing is going to be decided, you're just meeting to say, yes, we met on January the 5th.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think it's important, you hit on a real good item there, David. An agenda is a very important part of the meeting, and if you don't have an agenda, I know for me, if I went to a meeting and there was no agenda, I'd probably put forward a motion to end the meeting right there, because then it just becomes a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. I can warm a seat up at my own house better than I can warm a seat at a committee meeting with no planning and no plan in place or agenda.
This is where you frustrate people and you discourage the volunteers, and it's not good.
It has to be organized. And I personally like the idea of ad hoc committees. I look at the ad hoc committee that we've got going with the police. I think we're accomplishing some things, but we have an agenda every time too. And we're discussing things that are very important and valuable for our community. And I've been very pleased with the committees that I've been on, because they've been working committees, and it's important. But if any one of us have a committee that's not working, then that's where maybe it should be changed to an ad hoc committee. And only you guys can decide, each of us can decide, you know, and by recommendation, that maybe
Yeah.
it should be an ad hoc committee,
I hear you.
you know.
But I think also all meetings should have a time limit. Like I've got some meetings
No, you can
where
always
we
extend
gone for
them.
4 hours.
Yeah.
And we were no further ahead than when we started. So it didn't.
Probably
really-
2 hours before, you should have put a recommendation to adjourn the meeting.
Well,
Okay, I've been hit up with one, when we talk about our committee meetings, and using people at large to come in and serve on those committees. It has been confronted to me, you're as a counselor, you're paid. Me as a public, I'm not being paid. Why?
Yeah, well, we talked about that almost the beginning of our term.
So, is there an advantage to paying a stipends to people who serve on these committees other than the counselors?
Oh.
You wouldn't
And
be able
are
to
they
afford
gonna be
it.
aggressive?
You wouldn't be able to afford it, Councillor.
Well, I don't,
But this is
What
the
was
whole
that?
idea of building a community.
Money.
Building a community is built on volunteers. That's a principle that is age-old. There is no doubt in my mind that Kennedy said it best. It's not what the town can do for you, it's what you can do for your town.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what it is. That's a principle of volunteerism. And so if you are engaged and want to be engaged, you do it of your own volition. Right now, the system is maybe more conscriptive than volition. That's what the issue is. And so, are there some people who are really happy to volunteer? There is quite a few that love to volunteer for the sake of volunteering. And I like the system to carry on that way. The minute you put money in the mix, it doesn't resonate quite the same.
Well, you know, we get, you know, paid for counselor, and I don't think if you calculated it per hour, it wouldn't amount to very much. And I'm not aware that I got paid any extra for serving as chairman on the ad hoc age friendly committee. I did that from my point of view as a volunteer, as something that I didn't have to do, but you know, I was asked to do it. So as far as I'm concerned, I had the same position as everybody else on that ad hoc committee. I was serving voluntarily or conscripted, whichever way you say it.
Yeah. You didn't go as counselor,
And
you
I didn't,
went
you know,
as volunteer.
and I don't think I saw any added amounts, at least that I'm aware of in my
Yeah, no.
and I don't think we
for
should.
serving.
And that's something we'll
expect it.
lead into next meeting. It's about this remuneration for different committees. We'll get into that. So, okay, thank you.
Okay,
I'm
you're
about
up.
done grilling you, Council, I promise. One thing I'd like is if you can go to this document now,
Yeah.
it's part 2. If you can just scan it quickly and even email me later if you see something. If you can just see wherever your name is at the assignment, if the information I have or don't have, as the case may be, can you please tell me? Because I don't know on some of these if you are meeting monthly, or maybe you're not, like Councillor Edmonds in part of this conversation mentioned that Orsk is quarterly. I had it as monthly, so I got that fixed. So just things like that, I want to bring back this table with the proper information. And so really I'm just looking at councillor voting and meeting frequency and other related meetings is kind of what I'm curious about.
If you look at mayors and reeves on the bottom of your
Yeah.
page, it's monthly.
Okay.
Okay, so we've been asked to review this, council, and bring it to Jeff's attention after the fact, not during this meeting. Jeff, are you finished with this?
Yeah, if you want everyone just to get a hold of me, that's great. And that's all I have.
Then I would suggest we do that.
Okay.
It would take quite a while for each of us to review our committees and verbally tell you, whether your information is right or wrong. So do you agree with me, council?
You okay, just email me or call me if you see something amiss? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Jeff?
Yeah, there's stage 1 of the AVC review.
Thank you so much for that thorough analysis. It's good. It's been interesting conversation. I think we're going to improve our governance model in times.
Okay, we've covered number 8 already. So we'll go into correspondence. The first one is Minister of Canadian Heritage and Official Languages, telling us that we received $3,000 for our Celebrate Canada program. It was addressed to Jeff. It was fantastic. Item B, Alberta Health. Now, Alberta Health is...
Question, Richard.
Yes.
That Celebrate Canada program, what does that specifically?
It's for Party in the Park.
That's for Party in the Park.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have, that ministry has a specific Canada Day celebrations fund. And every year I've been here, I've applied for it, and it doesn't seem to matter what amount I apply for, we get $3,000. So
Okay.
I'm happy to take it.
Okay, in Alberta Health is a correspondence in regards to some letters that we sent out in recruitment in the Alberta, in the rural Alberta. Paragraph 2 basically summarizes this, I think. The written submission representing the town of Cardston. If you read that, I think it sort of summarizes the whole letter.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. If
Absolutely.
you see, they never replied to each letter, so they lumped them all in one and made a big hot pot of the issue, because they're writing obviously after the times. So what we recommended was then adopted in a report, which I'm happy to say it's exactly what we were hoping. And the last one, working with Sean Shelton, is a very interesting story, because he had suggested that we write that.
Yeah, we wrote the letter at his recommendation, and then we were told to work with him.
They're only throwing it back on our lap, so, which tells me that we're going to have to really keep an eye on what's going to happen in that department, because I don't want the progress that we made towards the hospital to be stalled.
Yeah,
So
it's time to
basically,
let
we
you
just
know
got
it.
form letter number 17.
Yeah, it's about it.
Okay, and we've also got a letter from Alberta Recycling that is addressed to Brandon Jensen, and that's in regards to receiving $9,478.50 for the rubber stone servicing out front of the Civic Center. That was very nice to get that.
A lot of people was very happy with that.
Oh, yes, and it looks nice
It
too.
really does.
Did Lloyd not apply for that grant? Wasn't it Lloyd's initiative?
Yeah, I
It
think
seems
it
was
was.
his
Brandon
initiative.
managed it, so he
It
dealt
was
with
his initiative, so we should thank him for
And our final correspondence is from Mr. Miller in regards to him replying to the delegation that he met with council, and some of his comments, and that will come up in our next meeting, will it not?
Yeah, I hope to have some stuff for council coming up soon. I have talked to our lawyers, and I'll put that together.
Okay. And like Jeff said, he's talked to legal, and he's got a lot clearer picture on basketball hoops and goalie nets and so forth on the streets. Is there any other correspondence? We have no confidential items,
so I'll do the nice honor.
and so Mayor Cronin.
Can I just ask a question
Yes.
first before you close? In regards to the code red,
Yeah.
if people do not have a computer, how do they get signed up?
I think they can come into the office and we can sign them up.
That's what
Yeah.
I've been telling them, but I've
Yeah.
had a few people say, well, I don't have a computer, I don't have.
I'm pretty sure we can help them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. We got a motion on the floor for adjournment. All in favor?
Yeah, sure.
We thank Lori and Kim for being here, and Jill for taking minutes, and administration. And thank you, council, it was a good meeting.
Thank you.